Welcome, and thank you for joining Bright Horizons for this family webinar all about working moms. At Bright Horizons, we're proud to support you working moms and applaud you for all you do. So we're looking forward to getting today's webinar started and introducing our guests, but before we do that, let's just review some quick housekeeping to make sure that you get the most out of today's session. So first, if you have questions you'd like to send to our guests, or if you need some technical help, you can put your question or your comment right in the purple Q&A widget or the button. We have folks, technical help on standby to help, and we'll be monitoring that throughout the session today. We have created a very engaging event for you today. We have some polls and other ways that you can participate and chat with each other and our speakers. So if you'd like to participate in the live group chat, you can do so by clicking the blue chat bubbles widget there at the bottom of your screen. We do ask, just because there are hundreds of you on live, just please be respectful of each other's ideas and so forth. And unfortunately, any violators or any weird activity, folks will have to be blocked. We do take that very seriously. We also encourage you to participate, chat with each other, share tips, and certainly chat with the speakers as well, right there from the blue chat bubbles widget. We also have a few polls for you guys today, so that will show up in the slide area. We'll let you know when we have a poll coming up. We also have a few resources for you today. First and foremost, you can access the latest from the Bright Horizons parenting podcast, The Work-Life Equation. You can do so right from the resources box to the left of the slide area. We also have a link to a number of other articles and blogs for you to take a look at. And then finally, you will receive an email within the next few days or so with a link to re-watch or share with your friends and other working moms the webinar today. So with that, I'm excited to turn it over to our host today, Eileen Serpa, who is the Vice President of Communications here at Bright Horizons.
Thank you, LaDonna. It's really wonderful to be here with all of you and to see so much excitement around this topic of working motherhood and motherhood for professionals. So it's really, really fantastic. Just to introduce myself, as LaDonna said, I am the Vice President of Communications at Bright Horizons. I, in that role, started this Modern Family Index survey about 5 years ago. We'll get into that a little bit more later, but it's really been a wonderful journey. That's part of my almost 20-year journey at Bright Horizons, during which time I had the great privilege to grow my career and my family at the same time. I am the mom of a 12-year-old daughter and an 8-year-old son, and that's who I am in a nutshell. So I am going to now turn it over to Lynn Robertson, who I've had the great privilege to encounter as we develop this year's Modern Family Index. So Lynn, take it away.
Great, thank you. First of all, thank you to Eileen, LaDonna, the entire team at Bright Horizons. It is my great honor and privilege to be with you all today, and really looking forward to a candid and hopefully insightful conversation. By way of introduction, I am the mother of 3. I have a 29-year-old daughter, a 23-year-old son, and a 15-year-old son. I founded, as noted here, Lead Like a Mother because I wanted to create a platform in which we could do things like we're going to do today, share our experiences and hopefully some insights and instructions for how to get through all this. I wanted to have a community where women could come together and find like-minded souls and work together to figure this out, because it's not easy. And also, as I said, figure out how to solve our respective problems as we go through this, and celebrate our successes too, by the way. I'm also the CEO of FAME, a brand experience agency based in Minneapolis. I've been the CEO for almost 15 years. About 3 years ago, I purchased the agency from the holding company in New York, and now we are proudly an independent, 100% women-owned company. So, but all that said, I'm still working on everything, and I'm really looking forward to learning from you all today, and looking forward to the conversation.
Terrific. As I said, I've had the great pleasure to meet Lynn along this journey, and I think you'll find today that she is fantastic as I think she is.
Back at you.
And a really wonderful expert in this topic that we're going to be exploring today. So here is the part of the webinar where we get to learn about you and who you are. So you'll get your, excuse me, I also have a little cough today. You'll see a poll where we are asking you where you are on your motherhood, parenthood, fatherhood journey, or if you are not personally on that journey but are here to learn about the topic for other reasons. So please go ahead and let us know if you're a working mom, if you're expecting, maybe you're a dad or a stay-at-home parent, or none of those fit you. So we'll take a minute, but while we're letting you answer, I'm going to ask you, Lynn, a little bit. What was it like to grow your family as you were growing your business?
Yeah, it was like I said at the beginning. I'm still figuring it out, so I don't know that I have a degree on that yet. But it was in equal measure challenging, but also really inspiring. As I have noted in my Lead Like a Mother platform, I think the basis of that all is that it's a very reciprocal skill set. So all of those things that I was learning at home and I was applying at the office, and likewise from the office back at home, particularly as the kids got into their teenage years, I found a lot of those things that I was learning at the office particularly useful in navigating that territory.
All right. It's really such a fascinating journey. And look, we have the results of our polls, and I think we've got virtually everyone here with us today, like you and like me, are working moms. But we've got some expectant moms, and if my little scroll will work here, some people who are none of these. Maybe a dad or two out there.
Yeah, let me just jump in, Eileen. Yeah, a couple of the working dads out there to shout out to you. A couple stay-at-home parents too, so that's great. I mean, this topic is wonderful for everyone, and a few, none of these apply. Feel free to expound on that in the live chat if you'd like, but otherwise we're going to move on.
Yeah, that's really cool. I was actually at a professional group, support group for working moms, and someone came to the table. Everybody was asked why they were there, and she said, I am not a mom, but I have a lot of people who work for me who are moms, and I wanted to learn a lot more about the topic so that I can support them. So I thought that was really cool, and if that applies to any of you out there, that's awesome. And thank you for being here to do that. So let me tell you a little bit about our Modern Family Index. As I mentioned earlier, this is our 5th year running, and every year we have taken a look at some aspect, a different aspect every year, of some of the challenges, opportunities, and trends that are out there facing working families. Not always necessarily focused on moms, but it does tend to drive us that way. This year in particular, we were looking at what it means to be a mom and bring the skills that you bring to motherhood, to the workplace, and vice versa. In this year's survey, we surveyed 2,000 people, roughly 2,000 people. About half of them were parents, half of them were not parents, about half of them were women, and half of them were men. So as you see the results of the survey and as we discuss some of the things that came out of the survey, understand that they are the views of all sorts of people, and not just the views of working moms about themselves. In a few instances, we did explore further working mothers' views of things, but really much of what we saw in the survey was the view of many, many people in the workplace, and not just working moms, but also their peers of all stripes. So what were some of the key findings? First, and really exciting for me, and really one of, I think, our more unexpected findings, was that all people in the survey, and even as you segmented the groups, every group individually agreed that mothers in the workplace bring some of the most important skills to the workplace in a way that is greater than their peers on those particular skills, and we'll drill into those some more. But there was a universal view that working mothers bring some really special skills. There was also consensus across all people in the survey that mothers are natural leaders. And again, we can talk about that a little more. Personally, I have a view that for many women, motherhood is their first journey in life as the presumed leader, the presumed authority. And maybe that's translating into what they bring to the workplace. But that's something we can look at a little further later. And then finally, one of our key findings, which is a little unfortunate, and we can, again, I invite you to discuss this in the chat a little bit, is that moms don't actually always feel confident about their leadership. Now, maybe that's not so surprising, but it is surprising when you look at it in the context of what other people think of moms in the workplace and the skills that they bring. And I think maybe we can do something to address that and get mothers feeling a little bit more comfortable with their natural leadership and the value of the skills that they bring. So, again, I said we were going to explore some of those factors in a little detail. So, what are some of those skills that people feel like working mothers bring to the workplace in greater measure than their counterparts? Multitasking, maybe that's not a surprise to those of you who are working mothers. It requires a lot of multitasking. Maybe if you're like me, it's not so much a surprise that people find that mothers bring more multitasking to the workplace than even fathers do. But it is required, of course, of all parents. You've got a lot on not just on your mind, but on your logistical plate. Huge number of people said that working mothers are better listeners. And again, I know that some people might attribute this factor to women in general, but just to debunk that notion, again, people felt like mothers in the workplace were even better listeners than women who were not mothers. So I think this really, we can be confident that this is something that people feel is connected to a woman's role as a mother and what she brings to the workplace. Almost half of people thought women were more diplomatic, calmer in a crisis, and 44% said that working moms are better team players. And again, these were the highest numbers of what people felt about these attributes compared to other peers in the workplace. And I think that's really compelling. And I'm wondering, Lynn, what do you attribute some of this to, both as a working mom, as a leader who has managed people in the workplace who are parents and who are not parents? Where do you think some of this might come from?
Yeah, I think you're right, Eileen, insofar as some of these are innately sort of gender-based, not to be stereotypical, but I think that it starts there. And I think as you become a mother and you just naturally have to take on all of these different roles, these things become essential to your survival. So, you naturally have to export them across your horizons, both from the office to your home. And the other thing is, I think that women in general are acutely emotionally intelligent, and I think most of these attributes come from there. I just wrote a blog about a recent Harvard Business Review article that talked about the fact that women, because of these things, are naturally more advantageous as leaders. And I know we're going to get to this in a while, but I think that we just need to be really proud about that, really need to lean into it and to really translate that into all aspects of our lives, because these are not, they are very unique skill sets that actually set people apart as great leaders, and I think we just need to celebrate and own them.
Yeah, I think that's so true, and I think what's also true is that we're seeing the workplace evolve to value these skills. We understand in 2019 more than we did 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, how valuable workplace culture is, how valuable emotional intelligence is in the workplace. And I think you see in the news today a lot of the ramifications of places and workplaces and industries that maybe haven't recognized that. And I'll just say, too, that in our work at Bright Horizons, where we have a lot of companies that do recognize that, you see the difference in companies that really understand what it takes. And, I think there are studies out there that show that those organizations that understand that value culture, that value emotional intelligence, outperform their peers in many cases.
I couldn't agree more. Yep.
So now we want to know what you think. We've got another poll coming, and we want to know what you think you're particularly good at. And as you answer this question, think about it in the context, for those of you who are working mothers, think about it in the context of both being a mother and a professional. For those of you who are fathers, again, think about it in the context of parenthood. And if you're not a parent, certainly just, think about it in terms of your own personal skills and what you bring to the workplace. So do you think that you're a good multitasker, listener, diplomatic? Which of these do you think are your best skills? I will chime in to say I do an awful lot of multitasking. Whether or not I'm good at it is maybe for somebody else to judge. But I definitely feel like that's, it's just, as you said, Lynn, it's one of those things, it's a survival skill that certainly at least I have to have as a parent. And maybe staying calm is something that I've learned as a parent, the value of being able to keep my cool when something goes on, so that I'm not flipping my kids out when something has happened that they might react to. And I'm wondering, what about for you, Lynn? What do you think is your best skill up there?
Yeah, my mind just flashed to, I'm not sure that I'm good at any one of these things, but I just flashed to a couple of things. And that staying calm thing, I mean, you think of all of those sort of natural disasters that occur at home, and all of those little eyeballs are on you, and you, despite probably freaking out inside, have to stay completely serene and focused on solving. So I remember many times where there was, blood involved, and you have to just stay completely focused on getting the child bundled up and off to some kind of medical care facility. But if that's not basic training for staying calm in the workplace, I'm not sure what is.
It's so true. I certainly found that I'm more likely to. Well, when my daughter was young, when I was a new mom, I was much more likely to freak out as a parent, not necessarily around the blood and those kinds of things, but around, frustrations, because here's this person that you have responsibility for, and yet you can't control what they're doing when. And I was not so much likely to freak out at work, but when I did freak out at home, when I lost my cool, and the stress came out, I saw the impact of that really directly with my daughter, especially when they're really young and they're just burst into tears because I couldn't keep it calm. And what that, I think, tells you is it informs, the very real consequences of staying calm or not. That, I think, translates for sure into the workplace.
I just encountered one of the working moms in my group, and she was in tears and just trying to hold it all together, and had one of those really stressful mornings that we're all familiar with. And I said, just to reassure, listen, there were many times I came to the office where my voice was hoarse from yelling at my kids, trying to get them ready and out the door in time for me to get to work. So we all struggle with that.
That's great. So now we're seeing some of the results, what folks think about their best skills. Multitasking seems to take the lead, except for the fact that more than one of these or some other skills are up there. So I think probably most people feel like they've got a couple of those at the top of their list. And then I think in the chat we're seeing some characteristics like being more organized. I wish I could say that was true of me. I'm not so sure it is. More productive, prioritizing. I think that's a really, really key one. You can't do everything. Those of us, I think you see multitasking is such a top issue there. Part of being able to do that successfully, I think, has got to be prioritizing. Time management, that's also a factor of prioritizing, I think, maybe, and being able to go with the flow, being flexible. Those are really key insights, and thank you all so much for bringing all of that up in the chat. That's terrific. So I think this is my favorite statistic from the Modern Family Index. I've got to say that 84% of the people we surveyed, again, parents, non-parents, men, women, believe that having working moms as leaders in their organizations will make their business more successful. That is just so important.
Here.
And so first of all, to all of you who are in this on this webinar who might be trying to grow in your careers, who maybe aren't at that, you're not the CEO, but you're aiming to go there, or you think that is part of your ambition, like, go for it. There are people who want you in those roles and people who know that you will make you'll make an important contribution as a leader in your organization. So that's really really, really important. I'm going to ask you all now to take another poll and to see what you do think about seeing yourself as a leader at work. Do you take on a leadership role, either formally or informally? You do not need to be managing a team of 50 people to be a leader in your organization. You don't even need to be managing one person. You can be in an entry-level role, but really taking a confident role in leading a project or leading a group of people toward an end goal. So let's ask you all what you think and how you see yourself as a leader at work. Lynn, you are indisputably a leader in both Lead Like a Mom and in FAME. Tell us a little bit about how you came to that place. Did you always feel like you had the ability to be a leader?
You know, I will say this. If my mother were here, she would absolutely say yes to that. I was fairly bossy. I don't really like that word, but I think it fits here insofar as when I grew up, that was not necessarily, that was kind of a pejorative. It wasn't necessarily a positive thing to be seen as the boss. And I am self-proclaimed have control issues. So I think those two aspects of my personality probably led me to that. But I know we're going to talk about confidence in a little while too. I don't know that I had that natural instinct in me. So I think the duality of that for me, becoming a leader, I had to bring those two things together. Sort of this natural aspiration to be a leader, sort of natural tendencies to be a leader, but then contrasted by like, I'm not sure I'm good enough, or I don't know that I have all the right stuff to do that. So I think that was a huge growth area for me as a leader. I think this is such a terrific statistic, and I'm really anxious for the marketplace to begin to embrace it, right? I think that if 84% of us believe that, 84% of the leaders in our country should be women or moms. So I'm grateful for the academics around it, and now I'm really anxious for the execution to happen in our world.
Here, no doubt about that.
Yeah.
So let's see what people think. Wow, this is great. I think we're seeing that, almost, close to 100% of people on this call either generally or sometimes see themselves as leaders at work, which is excuse me, fantastic. That is wonderful. I think that perhaps we have a not 100% representative group on this call, because I think, as you'll see in our next slide, I think this confidence around leadership is a real challenge that a lot of women face, and I think I'm just really energized, though, to see that the folks on this call see themselves generally as leaders, which is awesome.
That's great. Great.
Can I actually ask you a question, Eileen? So I saw that someone in the chat, they did pick up on the sort of the 84% of people, people believe that moms are leaders in the workforce, and they're great, and we all agree, of course. But then she does wonder about how the motherhood penalty plays into that. We do have a link to the podcast, so we definitely want you guys to check that all out. So I just wanted to put that out there for you, Eileen.
Yeah, there is a lot of self-contradiction that we found in the modern context. So we found that 84% of people think that mothers would be great leaders, and at the same time, we also see that people don't necessarily give women the respect that should go along with that. So we found in the survey that about 41% of the people surveyed felt that working moms were less devoted to their work, and almost 40% really judged moms for needing a flexible schedule. So let me first put it out there that a lot of people could need a flexible schedule,
right.
Not just moms, and that's something that I think all workplaces could look at. But, this idea that people have a perception that moms aren't devoted to work, but geez, if they just were, they'd be great leaders. And I think that that's something that we really need to work toward, because it's really silly. I mean, who could be more devoted to their work than a parent, mom or dad, who needs to support not just themselves but their families? This is what we need to do to be productive family units, and I don't understand why people wouldn't think that you'd be committed to your work if that, in fact, was the case, but it is where that penalty is, and that motherhood penalty is absolutely out there. So people don't necessarily have a logical progression of what they believe in terms of the strength of working mothers, and yet the credit and the respect that they give them. So I do think we need to recognize that that's out there.
Yeah, Eileen, I would just add, too, I think that the more national spotlight we have on women emerging as leaders, and certainly this last election period put some of those women out there, I think the more real examples that we have of women that are successful on both landscapes, the more that we'll be able to close that gap.
I think that's really true, and I think there's some other really interesting models of leadership. Women are huge percentages of the entrepreneurs, small business owners,
yep.
And people in work leadership roles in smaller workplaces that are really getting it all done and done well. And because they're multitaskers, maybe they have the ability to be that kind of entrepreneurial leader as well. And we seeing some examples of that and understanding how much women lead in some of those statistics really underscores the kind of
and again, I think the more attention we have on that, the more examples we have of that, the more it normalizes.
Yeah, I think that's really true. And you'll see the next slide up here. Really, this goes to one of the points points that I think those of us on this call, working moms out there, can really work on ourselves as well, which is an issue of confidence. That 1 in 4 working moms are concerned about their peers' perceptions. They feel 37% worried that they don't fit the mold of a leader. 19% worried that they won't be viewed as a leader. And I think that's it's not surprising to a lot of us. In some ways, I'm a little surprised these numbers aren't higher when you think about some of the workplaces out there that are really culturally living in the past and, so male-dominated and so unwelcoming to women, let alone mothers. But I think that there's an issue for sure of women's own confidence in being able to put themselves out there. And I'm wondering, Lynn, do you have any examples that you've seen of some of the women maybe that you've mentored in your career where you've had to address this with them?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's chronic and it makes me sad. But a couple things that I share with women is this: if you're a working mom, you are by nature the most brave person and should have the most confidence because you've mastered so many things. And you should be proud of that. You should own it. And you should relegate that to the world and really celebrate it and live it. The other thing is, I'm going to share a dirty little secret with you. Nobody feels confident. Nobody feels 100% confident. There's a real thing called the Imposter Syndrome, and some of the greatest leaders in our country, male or female, suffer from it. Anyone who elevates themselves above the crowd feels inadequate at any given time. So join the crowd.
Good point. Good point. So we're going to ask you all and what you think. This is, I think, our last poll maybe of this webinar. And we're going to ask you an interesting question, I think. Are you more confident in your success as a parent or as a professional? You have the option to choose that you feel equally confident or equally lacking in confidence in both areas, but I'm really interested to see what folks think here. And maybe in some cases that's evolved over time. I'm going to ask you how you feel about that now at whatever age and stage your children are, or again, if you're not a parent, thinking about it where you are right now in your career, your success at home and your personal life with whatever other people you are caring for, emotionally supporting. I'm gonna jump out right now and say that for me, I feel a lot more confident at work than I do at home. I, for instance, have not registered my children for summer camp, and I don't know when I'm going to research.
I love that.
And I feel like I've lost a lot of options because like January, February came and went, and I don't know if it's the same in every part of the country, but here in the Northeast, if you are not going to register your kids after the first snow has fallen, you might have lost a lot of opportunities for summer camp. But I definitely feel like I am shoestringing it at home, and quite frankly, I've just had less years of practice as a mom than I have as a professional. So I may be shoestringing it at work too, but I've had a lot more years in the workplace to feel like I do that a little bit better. How about you, Lynn? I'm going to put you on the spot.
Oh, man, I love that honesty. I probably had an equal balance of parenthood and workhood, but I feel, as you do, more confident in the workplace than I do at home. I feel like I'm failing someone on any given day, and they are not shy about letting me know. So,
all right. So let's see what you all had to say. More confident as a parent. So we do have slightly more people who are like you and me, more confident as a professional. But I think it's sort of equally distributed all over the place, and I think that's really really fascinating. I like that a lot.
I do too.
I'm seeing in the chat that folks are saying we're expected to work like we don't have kids and expected to parent like we don't have a job.
Oh my gosh,
that's
true.
So true.
So true.
I mean, that really resonates, and I think, for those of us who are in leadership roles, think about how much we can do to change that and to impact that. I think, being able to be at home and know that you are a role model to your children because you are using your education, you are working, you are supporting your family, you are using every part of you to be you by working, and that working is not a sacrifice that you are taking from your children, but in fact an investment that you are making in them. And then at work, I mean, what can we, be doing to embrace the fact that people have whole lives, whether it's that they are parents or they have other things going on in their lives, whether that's because they have parents who need care or they have other people in their lives.
That's a real thing.
Who need support. Kudos to the person who posted that. I'm gonna steal that and use that a lot
Me too.
more.
I love that.
I love that. So, Lynn, I am going to toss it over to you to talk to us about leading like a mother and how you came to this concept and what you want to share with us about that.
Great. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Well, as you've seen in the polls that we've taken and some of the findings that you had in the Modern Family Index, we have a ways to go in terms of recognizing, elevating, and celebrating mothers in the workplace, and I wanted to create a place where we did that. At the very basic level, I came to this because I think there is a reciprocal skill set, just like we've learned in this study, reinforced, is that the things that I'm doing at home, I can transfer to the workplace and likewise back from the office to the home front. So there's just some really great, robust learnings there that we can take into our real lives. The other thing is that, women are, and moms especially, working moms especially, they're bosses. I mean, they are doing things at a Herculean level, and I want to celebrate that. I want them to stand up and take credit for what they're doing and to stop apologizing for where they think they're falling short. Women and working moms are amazing, and I want to create a place where they can be recognized and share with one another to try and boost that level of confidence. And then finally, I've just encountered so many young women in my career where they feel like they either have to lean in or opt out, and I think there's a middle ground. I think there's a place where we can both be great moms and also have striving work careers. So I just wanted to create a platform and a community where we could learn from one another and help one another to be better on both fronts. So that was really kind of the genesis for it. I would say it's still a work in progress. I have a website, I do some events, I write a blog, but I have much bigger visions for it. But as I mentioned at the outset, I do still have a full-time gig, so I'm just trying to balance that. It's a little bit of a three-legged stool right now where I'm trying to prioritize. But as I said, there's definitely a reciprocal skill set. I think mothers bring a particular point of view to things that I think help them as leaders. So I articulate it sort of with these following characteristics. Vision. So both as a leader and as a mother, we are the architects of the mission, value, and value system of our systems. So as we go and as we, portend those things, our families and our teams come along. Motivation, I say this all the time, both at work and at home. My energy level is as the family's or the team's energy level. So as I show up, that's how they're going to show up. So if I need people to be energized and motivated, I better show up that way myself. We are always in service to one another. Some of the best leadership mentors I had were servant leaders. So I think our teams and our children benefit from when they see us serving one another. Empathy, any great insight as a leader and as a mom certainly to help people grow comes from an understanding of where they come from. So I think empathy is one of the most underrated skills in our environments, both personally and professionally. So I think we would all do well to help grow that one. I don't think anyone's any more creative than a working mother. Think about all of the things you handle on any given day. That requires, again, Herculean creative skills. Team building, both at home and at the office, that requires building ties that bind. Those are the things that matter when times get tough, so that we all help one another to get through them, and then also help us celebrate at a higher level when things are going well. So moms are in charge of that on both fronts. I don't think there's any bigger risk one can take than having a child. I mean, what other job do you go into where you have absolutely no training with higher consequences? So you're actually in charge of keeping another human being alive. So I think we just need to celebrate that you've taken the biggest risk of all time, and then relegate that into teams as you're growing people. It's the same thing. Process improvement, yeah. I don't think there's a mother out there that would say she's not always trying to make things better. I think we just need to give them credit for that. My youngest son almost criticizes me for that because nothing is ever quite right in my world. And he's like, Mom, you just always think things can be better. Yep, I do. And I think I'm not unique in that way.
Yeah,
yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say it's really interesting. I think that it's so much easier to take risk at work than at home, at least for me.
Isn't it, though?
I love that. I love that one.
Well, I think the stakes are lower. I mean, the stakes are higher at home, right? I mean, these are the people that are going to be taking care of you in a nursing home, potentially. So you got to do a good job.
You do. You got to keep them alive. You got to keep them breathing.
I know. And then you have to work on their whole psychology and, they become a productive person. The stakes are very high.
Lynn, while you're talking, I want to ask the folks on the line to tell us in the chat what you think are some of those skills that you really rock at home, at work. What ones do you do well in equal measure in both home at work, or which ones do you think that you could borrow from home and bring to work a little bit more, or from work and bring home a little more? And don't be shy. Let's celebrate those successes because I think that these skills, you bring them to yourself, you bring them to your teams, the people whom you might be mentoring, or the people from whom you might hope to get some mentorship and leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be anxious to hear what people have to say.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see that. And as we're waiting to hear, I wonder, Lynn, if you might talk to us a little bit about your 3 R's of leading like a mother. Yeah. Some good takeaways to help us really commit to this.
Good. Well, I hope so. Many of these were gained in the School of Hard Knocks, so I hope there's some value in that because it took some skin off of me. But I started thinking about this in a way that made sense to me and that I could, sort of portray to other working mothers that made sense to them. So I'm a Scandinavian. I come from a long line of repressed people, and I think really repression gets a bad rap. I think that if you have a healthy level of repression, it's what helps you get through life. Mental subjugation is almost vital to stay in the course, so the more you are able to compartmentalize things, the better able you are to get through things. And I think it's a vastly underrated skill. I think it also is a really powerful tool to help one overcome self-doubt and negative thinking. If you're able to shut down those negative voices, you can hopefully move past that in order to focus on what you're trying to do in a positive way. I think it's a way that you can banish all those should have, could have, would have.
Maybe a little
hopefully
like
lead.
Fake it till you make it.
Exactly. Just shove it away. It's useless, negative energy. It doesn't, those negative thoughts do nothing to help you move forward. So I think you use repression almost like an intellectual billy club to get rid of it. So it's an ability, I think, to help us recognize there's going to be bad stuff. And you know what? It's not always going to be our fault. Things are going to happen. People are not going to perform either at home or at the office the way we want them to. And that's not necessarily our fault. We're not perfect. We can't protect everything from everyone, so we need to stop blaming ourselves. So for me, tools for a healthy level of repression would be sort of that loud, positive inner voice to shut down those subconscious naysaying thoughts. I think we need to build a team of cheerleaders around us. Back in the day when my middle son was in middle school, we almost by default developed this mom club. We called it our Mom's Monthly Meeting, and in full disclosure, there was wine involved. But we would get together on a monthly basis and just sort of help each other along. We traded, tips and tricks around, teachers and, things that we were going through. We could share and know that we weren't alone in these struggles. And so I encourage working moms to help find their own tribe, and so they can understand that they're not alone in these struggles, and they can learn. I mean, none of this pathway has not been trodden before, so we don't have to each individually learn it the hard way. And finally, you just need to breathe through it all. I mean, it's just, like I said, nobody's perfect. Things are going to happen. It's not all cataclysmic. So that's my first R on repression, and I encourage people to use it liberally. I think resiliency might be my superpower. I am a very resilient person, almost to my peril. At times, I'm going to talk about the difference in a little bit about the difference between resilience and perseverance. But for me, resiliency helps weather the bumps. It keeps you bouncing back. It helps me put my emotion aside and hopefully focus on solving the problem. I think it's particularly helpful as you're raising kids through their teenage years. I mean, who doesn't need to be resilient when folks are shouting, "I hate you," in your face? So I think resiliency is an underrated skill as well. The dark side of resiliency, though, and I think all of us can be guilty of this, is that we think we just need to keep going sometimes. It'll get better, we just need to keep going, but I think we really need to take a temperature check at certain points to make sure that we're not being blindly persistent versus just resilient. Because if you're being persistent, that's not always going to pay. There's a difference. Resiliency is adaptable. Perseverance is static. Perseverance is just keeping your shoulder to the wheel, but resilience is looking around the wheel to see if I'm even at the right wheel. Resiliency is sort of improvement focused, whereas perseverance is just status quo. I'm just going to keep going. Resiliency is a problem solution-based attitude, and it begets progress. Perseverance just begets paralysis. We just keep spinning in that hamster wheel over and over and over again. So again, recognize when you're being resilient, elastic to life's problems, but also when you're just being persistent and pushing through, because you need to know the difference in order to get out of some of those things that are keeping you back. The final one is resolve, and I think anyone who's been a parent or struggled in a work environment knows that this is essential to keeping steady through tough times. I had a client a while back when I first bought the agency, and it was a really scary time for me, both financially as well as, psychologically. And Mike's friend Mike said, never stop believing in yourself. And I carry that with me through really hard times, because it's really easy to stop believing in ourselves because we get a lot of messages that tell us to do so. And so I think we have to pull deep from that resolve and just say, we are doing the very best we can on every level. We're not going to do it perfectly every time. We're not going to show up the way people need us to show up always. But I am doing the very best I can for the people that I care about. Being doubtful about oneself is inevitable. We talked a little bit about that, how to shut that down. But being resolute, I think, is the cornerstone of being a good mom as well as being a really strong leader. So it's hard to know sometimes how to do that. And I think our best tool is our gut check. We listen to our moral compass. We always know the right thing to do. And so really, really lean into that. I tell this to my team all the time. Sometimes they get feedback from clients that is negative and they take it personally. I said, you know what, you really have to parse through that. You look at it from a different lens, objectively, and remember that it's not always the truth. The feedback that you get both at home and at the office may not necessarily be the truth. You have to consider where it's coming from, what the circumstances are, and so hopefully that'll help democratize that feedback a little bit. We talked about listening a little while ago. I think that requires a lot of adjusting one's antenna to be able to adjust to a supportive frequency both internally and externally. We have a lot of negativity coming in through our brain waves, and we just need to find the dial to turn them down so we can focus on positive things to get us out of that. And to find ways to validate yourself. Sometimes I have taken at really hard times in my life where I just start making a list of the things that I've done well, or where people have told me well. I save texts from people like atta-girl texts, like, oh my gosh, you were a rock star at that. And just go back and review those sometimes. Look at your Facebook page for those times that you focused on what was positive. Sometimes those can bootstrap you out of those really negative places. So that's really a summation of my 3 R's.
I just love that, Lynn. It gives me a lot of perspective for myself. I think the undervalued characteristic of repression, and we think of that as being a really bad thing. We should be letting it all out. But I think the way that you position that and really look at it as a way to get beyond the stuff that holds us down is really terrific. And I think for people to really focus on that difference between resilience and perseverance. Resilience is maybe a trampoline that gets you somewhere farther. I'm going to use that, Eileen. That's good. And maybe resolve is just the people mover that keeps you on the same track. But I love that. I'm going to take a lot of that away with me. I know that a lot of people have had some questions. Some of you submitted questions during the registration process, and I think LaDonna is going to come at us with some of those. If you're ready, Lynn, I'm ready.
Bring it on. I'm ready.
No, we had a lot of really great questions, so we just have time for just a couple today. So the first question, it's a big one, but how does one balance the demands of motherhood with or, with the desire to move up on the ladder and to grow professionally?
It is a big question. I think that, first of all, you use Lynn's R of resolve, and resolve to absolve yourself of guilt. I think that I think it's so interesting that we feel that there's this, not only do we feel, but there is an expectation in society that we should feel guilty about working when we have young kids. And it's so strange. I mean, throughout history, women have worked and raised their children. There is nothing wrong with finding and relying on other people in your village to take care of your kids. We all send our children, well, except for people who homeschool, I suppose, but the vast majority of us send our children to school when they're 5 years old, and we don't feel guilty about that. I think we need to understand that this is a group project, to raise children, and working is part of what it takes to raise a child. And thinking about it in those terms, and understanding that that this is all just part of your life and who you are, and these are all pieces that are important in equal measure, and some are easier and harder at various times and at various parts of the journey, but they're all part of who you are. And if you feel guilty about one because you do the other, you're never going to thrive in either. Even if you're doing an okay job, you're just not going to feel good about it. So I'd say the first thing is, the way that you actually do it, the logistics, that's different for everybody. But I think what's universal is this need for us to embrace the fact that this is who we are. And we are whole people that have a lot of things going on in our life. And motherhood is a big, big part of that. And it may define us, but it isn't the only it is the only part of us. And being a professional is an equally important and valuable part of who we are.
I couldn't agree more. And here's the other thing. I read a statistic recently that more than half of households now in the United States are led by women, meaning they are the breadwinners. So I think we can stop apologizing for going to work when more than half of our households are supported by women, most of which are moms, by the way.
Oh, completely agree.
So a lot of folks have been talking about time and guilt, and I know you two obviously just touched on that. So one specific question, or I guess it is actually a question sort of a two sides to the coin. How do you make the best use of the time you have with your children when you get home from work? And then likewise, how do you turn it off when you're at work and just that kind of thing?
Yeah. So to the first question, again, the answer is maybe a little bit different for everyone, but I'll share with you a little bit about how I personally do that. There are certain times of the day where I have found, especially when my kids were really little, it's less important now that they're 8 and 12, which for some of you might feel like that's still really little, but to me, they're growing up. But that was first thing in the morning, I had to stop checking my email before I dropped my kids off at childcare, because being stressed about what was on my plate coming into work was really interfering with the way that I was interacting with my kids, and it was increasing their stress level. It made me focused less on them and more on how I was going to, how and when I was going to be able to get to my desk. But I think, but now, the idea that I can make my kids aware that I could leave work early today to take them to a soccer practice, but that meant that I was going to need to be on a phone call for work later in the evening. I can share that with them and help them understand that, and help them understand that that's an important thing too. It also helps. We've had to really get my son to understand that he cannot interrupt me every time I'm on the phone.
Yeah.
But, he understands that I have a job and that I help people in what I do, and that I support other people, and other people other than himself and his sister depend on me. And I think that helps grow them into whole, empathetic people. How do I shut it off at work? One simple answer: I don't. I am very open at work about my responsibilities, what I need to do. I could be in a meeting with the CEO, and if my daughter calls because she's supposed to call me when she walks home from school, I answer the phone. And guess what? He does the same thing too. And I think that for me, I don't try to shut it off at all. I think being able to be out there and be open makes it much easier for me to balance them, and to also set a tone for the people on my team that whether they are parents or they are, they need to go home to meet the dog walker, or they've they're moving into a new apartment and they need the time to do that. Having this expectation that they can share those things and they don't need to hide it in the workplace has been really that's been really important for me in the way that I balance it all.
I love what you said about, turning off the technology first, because I think that's been, both on one hand, an ability to be more fluid and to accomplish more on either side, but it's also the bane of our existence, because you're right, it distracts us. And so that would be my piece of counsel, too, is that when you're with your kids, really all they want from you is attention and focus. And so insofar as you can just shut that down, and it's really even not a quantity measure. It's really about quality. That's what they're going to take away. That's what they're going to remember, those moments that you truly connected. And so you can only truly connect when you are focused on them. So I think part of that, too, then, to your point, Eileen, is communicating that I'm going to be here, but then later I'm going to be there. And while I'm here with you 100%, I'm going to need to be over there 100%. And it's really about establishing those boundaries and communicating them so people understand and respect them.
Yeah. I had an interesting interaction at work. Our COO, she is the mother of a preteen and a teenager, and she and I had been vetting an issue, talking about how to solve to a particular problem. And she said to me, I asked my daughter, and here's what she had to say. And what I took away from that was less about the insight that her daughter had, although that may well have been part of our conversation. But what I really focused on was, she took her work challenge and talked that through with her daughter, which not only helped give her another perspective on this issue, but she made her daughter part of her work to understand it, and to not keep, again, like I try to not keep my family outside of my workplace, to not keep your workplace away from your kids, even, whether that's literally or figuratively, but to really bring them in, to embrace your work, to understand what you do, and to the extent that you can. I mean, everybody has different kinds of roles, and that can be easier or more difficult depending on what your job is and the appropriate nature of that, depending on your children's age. But I think that idea that your children really understand that this part of you is important, can help them really appreciate what you give to your work, and to not feel like you're just sort of, splitting your attention to something that they don't understand and can't appreciate.
We're not one-dimensional, right?
Yeah, exactly. No, that's a great point. Just one more quick question, and then we've got to wrap up. So hopefully, it's a good question, though. Lots of you on the chat have been talking about mom brain, mommy brain, whether it's especially new moms, but, lack of sleep, you've got a ton of things going on, commitments, you're juggling it all. Any tips, quick tips, for dealing with mom brain at work?
Understand the fact of the matter is that you probably feel it more than anybody else sees it.
Yeah,
I don't think that anybody sees you. I've never judged anyone else by saying, like, ooh, she's really, like, losing her edge here because as a new parent, though I have felt that way about myself. So I think it's really to understand that it's much more something that you see and other people don't. That's my experience. How about you, Lynn?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think we're so much harder on ourselves than how we appear in the outside world. And I would say, and this is going to sound, and I don't mean it to, but self-care is still really important here. I know that there are so many priorities at this point in our lives, but we have to stake out that territory. And even if it's as simple as a 20-minute walk or a manicure or whatever it is, whatever that means to you, that will help you sort of stave off that complete exhaustion, because it'll give you just a little bit of a boost. So try to find, I know, not on a daily, I would love to say do it on a daily basis. I recognize the pragmatics of that. but at least once a week or every other day. Find those moments where you can just take care of you.
Great. I think that's a great tip to sort of end the session on. So I want to just give a big thanks to Lynn and to Eileen for sharing all the wonderful data and strategies for today. So I'm just going to quickly close us out. So just a quick reminder, some resources. We have a link to the podcast, the Bright Horizons podcast, the work-life equation specifically, an episode on the Modern Family Index, but we would love for you to subscribe if you'd like to hear from a variety of guests discussing sort of the highs and lows of being a working parent. We talked about sort of it takes a village and guilt and managing time, so we have some episodes on those topics. So we invite you to subscribe on Apple or wherever you listen to your podcasts. We have some additional resources that we've specifically curated with the working mom in mind, so feel free to click on that link in the resources box as well. Finally, we'd love to hear what you thought of the session, so feel free to let us know by taking the survey. You just can click the teal button, the survey button, and we read all of the feedback, so let us know. We have our next family webinar coming up in May. We're partnering with the Museum of Science here in Boston, and we'll be talking about the E in STEM, so all about engineering. The webinar is taking place on May 28th, and you will receive an email to register pretty soon. So I think we're all set. Again, thank you, Eileen. Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you.
Thank you all, and thank everybody for joining the conversation, for all the active chat. I'm going to go back and read it all and take some tips from all of you, so thank you.